The air was thick with tension, the sounds of chaos echoing through the dilapidated building. Officer Jake Thompson stood at the forefront of a drug bust gone awry, his heart pounding in rhythm with the sirens blaring outside. The operation had started as a routine raid, but it quickly devolved into a nightmare. The squad had been ambushed, and now gunfire erupted from every corner, a cacophony of violence he had trained for but never fully prepared to face. "Get down! Move!" Jake shouted to his fellow officers, his voice barely cutting through the chaos. He ducked low, his training kicking in as he sought cover behind a crumbling wall. The smell of smoke filled the air, and the flickering light of flames danced ominously in the hallway ahead. He had to get to the source, to the heart of the danger. Suddenly, a faint cry pierced through the din, a small, desperate wail that tugged at something deep within him. It was the sound of a baby, lost amidst the turmoil. He glanced over his shoulder, where his partner, Officer Sanchez, was trying to secure the perimeter. "Sanchez, did you hear that?" Jake yelled, his instincts flaring. "Yeah, but we can't." Without waiting for a response, Jake sprinted toward the sound, his heart racing. He pushed through the haze of smoke and debris, his eyes scanning the dimly lit room. There, in the corner, amidst the wreckage of what was once a living space, he saw a small bundle. "Hang on. I'm coming," he called out, rushing toward the child. As he approached, the smoke grew thicker, making it harder to breathe. He could see the baby now, a little boy with big, innocent eyes, crying helplessly. Without a second thought, Jake scooped him into his arms, the warmth of the child contrasting sharply with the cold reality of the situation. "Sure, it's okay. I got you," he murmured, trying to soothe the frightened child while glancing around for a way out. The building creaked ominously, flames licking at the walls, threatening to consume everything in their path. He could hear the distant shouts of his colleagues, but their voices were muffled by the growing roar of the fire. "Jake, we need to get out." Sanchez's voice broke through, urgency lacing his tone. "I can't leave him." Jake yelled back, tightening his grip around the baby. He turned and dashed back toward the entrance, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The heat intensified, and he felt the sting of smoke in his eyes. Just as he reached the doorway, a loud explosion shook the ground beneath him, sending debris flying in all directions. Instinctively, Jake shielded the child with his body, praying for their safety. The world around him faded into a blur of smoke and chaos as he stumbled out into the open air, gasping for breath. "Get the medic!" he shouted, collapsing onto the grass outside as he cradled the baby against his chest. The cries of the child filled his ears, a haunting melody of fear and despair. Moments later, paramedics rushed to his side, their faces a mix of relief and urgency. "What happened?" one of them asked, quickly assessing the situation. "I found him inside. He needs help," Jake replied, his voice strained. The medic gently took the baby from him, their hands brushing against each other, a fleeting connection that spoke volumes of the bond formed in those harrowing moments. As they worked on the child, Jake's heart sank when he heard the whispers from the crowd gathering around them. "That's Malik, the son of," one man muttered, glancing toward the scene of the raid. The reality of the situation crashed down on Jake like a wave. He hadn't just saved any child. He had rescued the son of a notorious drug lord, a reality that twisted his insides with a blend of pride and concern. Later that night, after the chaos had subsided and the adrenaline had worn off, Jake found himself standing in the sterile hospital room, staring down at Malik, who was now resting peacefully in a crib. The flickering light above cast soft shadows on the child's face, illuminating the innocence that seemed so fragile in the world they had just escaped. "I promise to keep you safe," Jake whispered, leaning closer. "No matter what happens, I'll be there for you." As he spoke, he felt a surge of protectiveness wash over him, a commitment that would shape the years to come. Unbeknownst to him, Their lives were intertwined in ways that would challenge the very fabric of loyalty and family, setting the stage for a tumultuous journey ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, Malik Thompson sat on the worn steps of the small porch that belonged to Officer Jake Thompson. The house was modest, a refuge from the chaotic world outside, yet it felt like a fortress to him. At 16, he was caught in the throes of adolescence, grappling with the shadows of his lineage. The weight of his father's notorious reputation loomed large, casting a pall over his day-to-day life. "Hey, Malik," Jake called out, stepping outside with a cup of steaming coffee in hand. "You want some hot chocolate? I made a fresh batch." His voice was warm, an anchor in Malik's turbulent sea of thoughts. Malik looked up, a faint smile breaking through his troubled demeanor. "Sure, that sounds great." He stood, dusting off his jeans, and followed Jake inside. The kitchen smelled of cocoa and the remnants of dinner, a reminder of the simple joys they shared. As they settled at the small dining table, the atmosphere shifted. Malik could feel the tension in his chest tighten. He wanted to ask Jake about his father, about the life that Malik felt so tethered to yet desperately wanted to escape. But the words felt heavy on his tongue. "Everything okay?" Jake asked, his brow furrowing with concern as he poured the rich chocolate into a mug and handed it to Malik. "Yeah, just thinking," Malik replied, his fingers wrapping around the warm mug. The heat seeped into his skin, but it couldn't thaw the cold knot of fear in his stomach. Jake leaned back in his chair, studying Malik. "You know, you can talk to me about anything, right? Whatever it is, it won't change how I feel about you." Malik's heart raced at the sincerity in Jake's voice. "I know, it's just, sometimes I feel like I'm stuck, you know? Like I have to choose between what my family expects and what I actually want." Jake nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. "It's tough. Your father made choices that put you in a difficult position. But you're not him, Malik. You have the chance to carve your own path. But it's hard to ignore where I come from," Malik said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "People look at me differently because of him. Sometimes I wonder if I'll end up like him, caught in that world." "You won't," Jake replied firmly, leaning forward. "You're not destined to repeat his mistakes. You have a choice. Every day, you have the power to choose who you want to be." Malik took a sip of his hot chocolate, the rich flavor coating his tongue, but it did little to sweeten the bitterness of his reality. What if I want to be part of something bigger? What if I want respect? Power? The words spilled out before he could catch them, and he regretted the admission instantly. Jake's expression shifted, a flicker of concern flashing in his eyes. "Respect and power can come from doing the right thing, Malik, not from fear or violence. You're smart, and you have the potential to change things, to rise above it all." Malik sighed, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "But it feels like everyone around me is caught up in this cycle. Every time I step outside, I see it. The gangs, the drugs. It's all I know." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the unspoken truths of their lives. Jake leaned back in his chair, breaking the stillness. "Do you remember that night when I saved you from that fire? Your life was in danger, and I didn't think twice. I would do it again in a heartbeat." Malik nodded, a wave of gratitude washing over him. "I know you would. You've always been there for me, Jake. And I always will be," Jake assured him, his voice steady. "But you need to decide what kind of man you want to be. You can't let your father's choices dictate your future." Malik's heart raced as he considered Jake's words. The internal struggle raged on, and just as he opened his mouth to respond, a distant sound broke the moment, a low rumble of voices drifting in from the street. Malik's gaze darted toward the window, where shadows moved in the twilight. "Stay here," Jake ordered, his tone shifting to one of authority. He rose, instinctively reaching for his sidearm, the protective instincts of an officer kicking in. Malik's pulse quickened. "What's going on?" "Just stay put. I'll check it out," Jake replied, his eyes narrowing as he stepped toward the door. Malik felt a surge of panic. He wanted to follow, to protect Jake as much as he felt Jake had protected him for all these years. But as Jake opened the door, Malik's heart sank, knowing that the man he admired might be stepping into danger. Danger that was too close to home. The air in Officer Jake Thompson's precinct was thick with tension. Whispers of discontent echoed through the station, fueled by the unsettling rumors surrounding his relationship with Malik. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the blinds, Jake sat at his desk, rifling through reports but barely able to focus. His thoughts were consumed by the boy he had rescued. A boy now teetering on the edge of a precipice he couldn't control. "Hey, Thompson," a fellow officer called out, breaking the silence. Officer Sarah Mitchell leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. "You've heard the chatter, right? People are saying it's not safe for you to be so close to Malik, considering who his father is." Jake looked up, his jaw tightening. "I'm aware, Sarah, but he's just a kid. I won't abandon him." "Sure, but it's not just about you anymore. What if he gets involved with the wrong crowd? You know how these gangs work. They don't care about family ties. They care about power and loyalty," she replied, her tone laced with concern. "I've been there for him since the day I pulled him from that fire. I'm not going to turn my back on him now," Jake insisted, his voice steady yet strained. He could feel the weight of his own words, knowing that they held a deeper truth. Malik was more than just a charge. He was a part of Jake's life, a bright light in the darkness that surrounded them. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit corner of the city, Malik found himself seated on the steps of an abandoned warehouse, the sound of distant sirens echoing like a haunting lullaby. He was drawn into the world of the gang, captivated by the charisma of one of its members, Rico. With slicked back hair and an easy smile, Rico had an aura of confidence that Malik found intoxicating. "Why do you hang out with that cop?" Rico asked, tilting his head slightly. "You know he's just using you, right? You're the son of a kingpin, and he thinks he can save you from your bloodline. But you could be so much more." Malik felt a shiver run down his spine. "Jake's not using me. He saved my life." "Did he, though? Or did he just pick you up out of the flames because it made him look like a hero?" Rico's voice dripped with skepticism. "You've got a legacy, Malik. A chance to rise above what he represents. You could have power, respect. You just need to know where to look." The allure of Rico's words wrapped around Malik like a snake. He was torn between the life he had known with Jake and the dangerous thrill that came with gang life. He could feel the pulse of the streets calling to him, a siren song of adrenaline and danger. "Come to the meeting tonight," Rico urged, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "You'll see what real power looks like. You'll finally understand that you're not just a pawn in someone else's game." As Malik pondered the invitation, guilt gnawed at him. The thought of betraying Jake, who had always been there, felt like a knife twisting in his gut. Yet, the temptation of stepping into his father's world and claiming his rightful place was a powerful force pulling him in. Later that evening, Malik stood in front of the mirror, his brow furrowed as he contemplated the choice before him. His phone buzzed on the dresser, a message from Jake lighting up the screen. "Just checking in. Hope to see you soon." His heart raced, the conflict within him intensifying. He knew what Jake would say if he found out, how he would plead for Malik to stay away from that life. But the pull of his lineage, the promise of belonging, was almost overwhelming. "Malik," his mother called from down the hall, breaking his thoughts. "Dinner's ready." "Coming," he shouted back, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. He took one last look in the mirror, the reflection staring back at him feeling less like himself and more like a stranger. The decision loomed large, casting a long shadow over his heart. As he made his way to the dinner table, Malik felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He was at a crossroads, and no matter which path he chose, the implications would ripple through the lives of those he cared about most. The allure of the gang life was real, but so was the bond he shared with Jake. Little did he know, soon, Those two worlds would collide in a way he could never have anticipated. Malik stood at the entrance of the dimly lit warehouse, the air thick with tension and the pungent scent of cigarettes and sweat. Shadows danced across the walls, cast by flickering fluorescent lights that struggled to stay alive. This was the place where his father's legacy loomed large, a world steeped in crime and camaraderie, but also betrayal and bloodshed. He hesitated for a moment, his heart racing, as he thought about Jake and the sacrifices he had made for him. "Come on, Malik. You're one of us now," a voice called from deep within the warehouse, breaking his reverie. It was Rico, a charismatic gang member whose flashy demeanor had drawn Malik in like a moth to a flame. Rico had a way of making everything seem enticing, promising a life of power, respect, and the thrill of the streets. Malik took a deep breath, steeling himself as he stepped inside, the door creaking ominously behind him. The room was filled with familiar faces, all eyes turning to him as he entered. He could see the glint of admiration mixed with expectation in their gazes. They were waiting for him to prove himself, to show that he could be trusted, that he was worthy of the legacy left behind by his father. Malik's heart sank. The weight of their expectations felt suffocating. "Look who finally decided to join us," Rico smirked, throwing an arm around Malik's shoulder. "You ready to show them what you're made of?" "Yeah, sure," Malik replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He could feel the tension in the room, the way the air crackled with unsaid words and unfulfilled promises. As he looked around, he saw old men with weathered faces, their eyes shadowed by years of violence, and young men eager to prove themselves in a world that demanded loyalty above all else. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted when an older man, Victor, stepped forward. He was a former associate of Malik's father, his presence commanding respect. "We've been watching you, kid," he said, his voice gravelly. "You carry your father's blood, and we expect you to act like it. This is your chance to step up. We've got plans to reclaim what's ours, and we need you on our side." Malik swallowed hard, the enormity of the situation crashing over him like a wave. "What do you mean by plans?" he asked, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. He thought of Jake, the man who had saved him and cared for him, the man who had always shown him a different path, one filled with hope and integrity. Victor leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "You'll find out soon enough. For now, just know that loyalty is everything in this world. You need to choose your side wisely, Malik. We can make you powerful." Malik nodded slowly, but inside, he felt a storm brewing. He was torn between the life that was expected of him and the one Jake had shown him. The image of Jake's determined face flickered through his mind, reminding him of everything that had been sacrificed for him. He felt an overwhelming urge to run, to escape this life that was calling him back, yet he was rooted to the spot. "Think about it," Rico said, sensing Malik's hesitation. "You want respect? You want to be someone? This is your chance. Don't throw it away." As the meeting continued, Malik's mind raced with thoughts of Jake, the laughter they shared during quiet moments, and the lessons of right and wrong that Jake had instilled in him. He couldn't shake the feeling that stepping deeper into this world would mean betraying the man who had fought for him, who had given him a chance at life beyond this chaos. Later that evening, Malik found himself walking the streets, his heart heavy with conflict. He pulled out his phone, staring at the screen as he contemplated reaching out to Jake. Would Jake understand? Would he be disappointed? It was a choice that felt insurmountable, a chasm between loyalty to blood and loyalty to the man who had saved him. "Malik," a voice called from behind him. He turned to see Jake, his face etched with concern. "I've been looking for you. Where have you been?" "I was just out," Malik replied, avoiding Jake's gaze. He felt the weight of the truth pressing against his chest, threatening to spill out. "Out where? You're not in trouble, are you?" Jake's voice was firm but laced with worry. "I need you to be honest with me." Malik hesitated, the words caught in his throat. He could see the sincerity in Jake's eyes, the unwavering support that had been his lifeline. "I've been hanging out with some friends," he finally admitted, his voice faltering. "Friends? What kind of friends?" Jake pressed, his brow furrowing. "You know I care about you, Malik. I need to know you're safe." Malik took a deep breath, the storm within him raging. They're connected to my father's old gang," he confessed, his heart pounding. The truth hung between them like a fragile thread. "What?" Jake exclaimed, his expression shifting from concern to shock. "You can't be serious. You know what they're involved in, what they're capable of. You need to distance yourself from them." "I'm trying to figure everything out, Jake," Malik shot back, frustration boiling over. "You don't understand what it's like. I'm caught between two worlds, and I don't know which one to choose." Jake stepped closer, his expression softening. "I understand more than you think. I've fought to protect you, to give you a chance to be better than your father. But you have to make a choice, Malik. You can't have both." The weight of Jake's words hung in the air, wrapping around Malik like a vice. The decision loomed over him like a dark cloud, pushing him further into a corner. As he stood there, the echoes of his father's legacy whispered in his mind, and the reality of what lay ahead began to take shape. The air crackled with tension as Officer Jake Thompson made his way down the dimly lit alley, the familiar sounds of the city echoing around him. He had just completed a routine patrol, but something felt off. A nagging sense of unease settled in his gut, a feeling that today would not end like any other day. Little did he know, danger lurked just around the corner, waiting to ambush him in a way he could never have anticipated. Meanwhile, Malik stood a few yards away, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched the scene unfold. He had followed Jake, feeling a strange mix of admiration and dread. He wanted to warn him, to shout out that trouble was coming, but his feet felt glued to the ground. The gang members were closing in, their faces masked and expressions menacing. Malik recognized a few of them. Familiar faces from the neighborhood that had once felt like home, but now felt like a prison. "Look who we have here," one of the gang members sneered, stepping forward with a swagger that dripped with arrogance. "The golden boy, Officer Thompson. Think you're above us just because you saved that kid? You don't know what he really is, do you?" Jake straightened, his jaw tightening. "I know exactly who he is, and he deserves better than this life," he shot back, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He took a step back, assessing the situation, knowing he was outnumbered. "What do you know about loyalty?" another member spat, stepping closer, fists clenched. "You're just a cop. You don't belong here." The words hit Malik like a punch to the gut. He felt torn, caught in the crossfire between the life Jake had given him and the bloodline that called to him. He wanted to scream, to rush in and protect the man who had saved him so many years ago, but the gang's presence held him captive in an emotional vice. "Get lost, Thompson," a third member growled, pulling out a knife and brandishing it menacingly. "This is your last warning." Jake's eyes narrowed, his instincts kicking in. He knew he had to defuse the situation, but the odds were against him. "This isn't the way," he said calmly, trying to appeal to whatever sense of reason lay within the gang members. "You're making a mistake." But before he could finish his thought, the gang lunged at him. A flurry of chaotic movements erupted, fists flying and bodies colliding. Jake fought back, adrenaline fueling his actions as he defended himself against the onslaught. He had faced danger before, but this felt personal, like a battle for more than just his life. From his spot in the shadows, Malik felt his heart race as he witnessed the brutal confrontation. Every punch Jake threw resonated within him, a reminder of the sacrifices the officer had made to give him a chance at a better life. The weight of his identity pressed down on him, and for a fleeting moment, he contemplated running away, hiding from the chaos that surrounded him. But then he saw Jake stumble, the officer momentarily losing his footing under the relentless assault. Malik's breath hitched in his throat. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't let the man who had saved him become a victim of the very world he was trying to escape. Stop! Malik shouted, breaking free from his paralysis. His voice rang out, cutting through the chaos like a knife. The gang members froze for a split second, surprised by the sudden interruption. Jake seized the moment, glancing back at Malik, a mixture of hope and concern in his eyes. "Get back, Malik!" he yelled, urging him to stay out of harm's way. But Malik felt a swell of determination rise within him. "No, I won't let you hurt him." Malik stepped forward, adrenaline surging through his veins. He was torn between two worlds, but in that moment, he chose to stand with the man who had given him a chance at life. As the gang members shifted their focus toward Malik, their expressions morphed from surprise to anger. "You really think you can protect him? You're just a kid." One of them scoffed, but Malik stood firm, his heart pounding with resolve. "I'm not just a kid. I'm not just my father's son," he shouted, the words spilling out before he could stop them. The truth felt liberating, yet terrifying. He was ready to confront the legacy that had haunted him for years. The sirens in the distance began to wail, a haunting sound that grew louder, a reminder that help was on the way. Malik's heart raced, knowing he had to act fast, but as the gang members closed in, he felt the weight of the decision that loomed over him. Would he step into the fray for Jake, the man who had saved him, or would he let the shadows of his past consume him? The air was thick with tension as Officer Jake Thompson found himself surrounded by a group of gang members, their faces twisted in malice. Each punch he threw was met with resistance, the adrenaline pumping through his veins as he fought to hold his ground. He had always been a protector, but now, with fists flying and the sounds of chaos ringing in his ears, survival was his only thought. He could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him, the stakes higher than ever, especially when he thought of Malik. From a distance, Malik stood frozen, his heart racing as he watched the man who had saved him countless times now struggling against the very people he had been warned about. The gang members were relentless, and Jake's strength was waning. Malik's mind raced, torn between the loyalty to his own blood and the gratitude he felt for Jake, the man who had given him a chance at a better life. "Jake!" Malik shouted, his voice breaking through the din of the fight. But the chaos masked his cry, and Jake remained oblivious, focusing on the immediate threat ahead. Malik felt a fire igniting within him, a mix of fear and determination. The gang members had always been enticing, whispering promises of power and respect, but in this moment, those words felt hollow. He took a shaky step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "Stop!" he yelled, louder this time. "I'm not going to let you hurt him." The gang members turned, surprise flickering across their faces. Malik could see the recognition dawn on them. They knew who he was. One of them, a tall man with a scar running down the side of his face, sneered. "What's this? The little prince thinks he can play hero? You're not one of them, Malik. You belong with us." Malik took another step, each movement feeling like he was crossing a chasm. "I'm not like you," he shouted, his voice steadying as he made his choice. "I'm not going to follow in my father's footsteps. I'm done with this life." Jake, catching a glimpse of Malik's determination, managed to duck a punch and turned to face him. "Malik, no. Get back!" he yelled, panic flashing in his eyes. But Malik was resolute. "I won't let you die, Jake." His words were a declaration, a promise. As the gang members advanced, Malik reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a flash drive, holding it aloft like a beacon of hope. "I've been collecting evidence against you all. This ends now." The tension in the air shifted, a moment of disbelief rippling through the gang. The scarred man laughed, a harsh sound that grated against Malik's ears. "You think that little stick can save you? We own this city, kid." With a surge of courage, Malik pressed on. "Maybe, but not for long. You think I'm afraid of you? You're nothing without fear." He glanced at Jake, who was still trying to fend off his attackers, and took a deep breath. "I'm not afraid anymore." In a split second, Malik charged forward, the flash drive clutched tightly in his hand. He hurled it to the ground, the plastic cracking against the pavement. The sound was like thunder, echoing through the alley, drawing the attention of nearby officers who had heard the commotion. "Jake, this way," Malik yelled, his voice cutting through the chaos. As the gang members turned to assess this new threat, Malik seized the opportunity. He leaped into the fray, pushing Jake back as he took on a couple of the attackers himself. The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Malik could hear the shouts of his fellow officers, and he knew they were closing in. The gang members started to panic, glancing around as they realized their time was running out. "Run, Malik," Jake urged, his voice strained. But Malik shook his head, determination blazing in his eyes. "Not without you." With one last push, Malik and Jake fought off the remaining gang members, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Just as the first officers arrived, the gang members scattered, realizing their reign of terror was coming to an end. As the officers apprehended the fleeing criminals, Malik and Jake stood side by side, breathless and bruised but alive. Malik looked at Jake, tears brimming in his eyes. "I did it, Jake. I chose you." Jake placed a hand on Malik's shoulder, pride swelling in his chest. "You did more than that, Malik. You chose your own path. You chose to fight for what's right." In that moment, amidst the chaos and the aftermath of the confrontation, they understood that their bond was forged in the fires of sacrifice and choice. Together, they would redefine family, loyalty, and the legacy they would leave behind, leaving the shadows of the past to fade away. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and watch this next story that's very exciting.